She is standing outside his office building for the third time this week. It is just past 7 in the morning, and the street is still quiet enough that she can hear her own breathing. She holds a coffee, his order, the one she memorized from watching him at the cafe down the block, and she is smiling. Not the anxious smile of someone who knows they are doing something wrong. A calm, patient smile. The smile of someone waiting for a thing that is already decided. His name is Daniel. He is a 43-year-old architect who works on the 6th floor. They have never spoken. They have never made eye contact, not in any way she could be certain he intended. And yet, in the mind of the woman we will call Claire, there is no ambiguity whatsoever. Daniel is in love with her, has been, she believes, for nearly 2 years. He simply cannot say so yet, not openly, because of the circumstances, his position, the professional gap between them. But the signals are everywhere, if you know how to read them. The way he once paused near the door of the building when she happened to be walking past. The slight change in his posture at a public event they both attended. Small things, unremarkable things. To anyone else they are nothing. To Claire they are a private language. A conversation conducted without words, across distance between two people who already understand each other completely. She does not believe she is unwell. She believes she is in love. And she believes, with a certainty that no evidence and no intervention has yet been able to touch, that he loves her too. Erotomania is classified in the DSM-5 as a subtype of delusional disorder. At its core, it is a fixed, false belief, a delusion, that another person, typically of higher social status, is deeply in love with the individual experiencing it. The object of the delusion is usually someone the patient knows only at a distance, a public figure, a professional acquaintance, a neighbor. In most documented cases, the two have had little to no meaningful personal interaction. That absence of interaction is not experienced as evidence against the belief. It is woven into the belief itself. The supposed lover cannot declare themselves openly, the patient reasons, because of external obstacles, social constraints, professional risk, family obligation. The restraint is reinterpreted as devotion. The silence is read as proof. This is what makes erotomania so clinically distinctive. Most delusional systems can be partially challenged. The patient may experience moments of doubt, moments where reality intrudes. In erotomania, reality is not merely ignored. It is actively recruited into the delusion's architecture. A missed phone call becomes a coded message. An unanswered letter becomes evidence of how carefully he is protecting her. Contradiction becomes confirmation. The condition was formally described by French psychiatrist Gaëtan Gatien de Clérambault in 1921, and it carries his name in clinical literature. It occurs across genders, though the majority of documented cases involve women fixating on male subjects. It can appear as a primary diagnosis or as a symptom embedded within schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, or other psychotic illnesses. Onset is typically gradual, quiet, and almost entirely invisible to outsiders, until it isn't. Claire's case follows this pattern with uncomfortable precision. She was 31 when the belief took hold. There were no dramatic warning signs, no obvious break with reality, just a thought at first, a feeling that slowly hardened into certainty. Before any of this, Claire was, by most measures, a functioning and thoughtful person. She worked as a medical transcriptionist, detail-oriented, methodical work that she was good at, and that suited her temperament. She had a small apartment in the kind of neighborhood where people nod at each other in the hallway but rarely stop to talk, and she had filled it carefully. Bookshelves organized by subject, a kitchen she actually used, plants she kept alive. She had friends, though not many. She was the type of person who preferred depth to breadth in relationships, 1 or 2 people she trusted completely, rather than a wide social circle. She had been in 2 long-term relationships, both of which had ended without catastrophe. She was not isolated. She was not obviously lonely. Her therapist at the time, she saw one every few weeks for what she described as generalized anxiety, noted that Claire was perceptive, articulate, and had a tendency to analyze situations from multiple angles before arriving at a conclusion. She was, In her own words, not someone who jumped to things. What those who knew her best might have noticed in retrospect was a certain quality of inner life that exceeded what she expressed outwardly. She thought about people deeply. She noticed things, small behavioral cues, shifts in tone, the way a person positioned themselves in a room. She had always been this way, and it had mostly served her well. It made her a careful reader of people. It made her, when the delusion arrived, an extraordinarily capable builder of a world that did not exist. The man she would come to know as Daniel entered her awareness in an ordinary way. She passed his office building most mornings on her route to the transit station. She saw him occasionally, not often, maybe once or twice a week, in the lobby, or on the steps, or at the cafe where both of them apparently had the same pre-work habit. She noticed him the way you notice someone who exists on the edges of your daily geography, a familiar face that belongs to no particular narrative. The first sign that something was shifting came quietly. She began to notice him more, to look for him. She told herself this was nothing unusual. He was attractive, she was single. This was just the ordinary machinery of attraction. But the noticing intensified. She found herself arriving at the cafe at the time she'd calculated he usually appeared. She found herself walking the longer route to the station, the one that took her past his building. And then, one morning, in what she would later describe as an otherwise unremarkable Tuesday, something clicked into place. He glanced at her as she walked past, just a glance. Brief, almost certainly incidental. But in the days that followed, she found herself returning to it, examining it, finding in its brevity not indifference but intention. He had looked at her that way because he knew, because he felt it too. The thought, once formed, did not soften. It did not behave the way ordinary romantic hopes behave, wavering, doubtful, subject to the erosion of unanswered texts and unreciprocated gestures. It solidified. Her friends noticed she seemed preoccupied but happy. Her therapist noticed she had stopped discussing her anxiety and begun discussing, obliquely, a new sense of purpose. No one connected these things. There was, at this stage, nothing to connect. Over the following year, the belief became the organizing principle of Claire's interior life. She began documenting what she experienced as evidence, a journal meticulously kept, in which she recorded each instance of what she interpreted as communication from Daniel, a LinkedIn profile update that occurred the day after she had walked past his building, a post from the architectural firm's social media account that used a word she had also used in something she'd written in her own private blog years earlier. She did not consider that these were coincidences. She considered them responses. The documentation gave her framework a kind of coherence. Internal, self-referential, hermetically sealed. She wrote him a letter, carefully worded, not aggressive, almost formal in its tone. She slid it under the lobby door of his firm. When no response came, she did not revise her belief. She expanded it. The lack of response confirmed the sensitivity of his situation. She wrote again and again. Over the course of 8 months, she sent 12 letters. She attended a public lecture at an architectural institute because his firm was listed as a sponsor. She stood near the entrance, certain that his presence there, he did not attend, was a deliberate near miss designed to draw her closer without yet committing to contact. By this point, her social relationships had narrowed considerably. She had reduced her hours at work, citing fatigue. She had stopped seeing her therapist, having concluded that the therapist would not understand and would pathologize what Claire experienced as a profound and legitimate connection. She was not visibly distressed. This is important to understand. She was not suffering in the conventional sense. She was subjectively engaged in the most meaningful experience of her life. The suffering belonged to Daniel. He had engaged a solicitor to send a formal notice requesting that all contact cease. Claire read this as an intervention by a third party, someone jealous of their connection, someone attempting to keep them apart. She set the letter aside and wrote back. What is happening neurologically and psychologically during the events Claire is living through? Research into delusional disorders points to dysfunction in several interconnected systems. The dopaminergic pathways, the brain's machinery for assigning meaning and reward, appear to be dysregulated in ways that cause ordinary neutral stimuli to feel profoundly significant. A glance carries the weight of a declaration. A coincidence registers as a pattern. The brain is not malfunctioning in a way that feels like malfunction. It feels like clarity. This is the neurological trap at the center of erotomania. The brain's pattern recognition systems, which in most circumstances allow us to read social cues accurately, appear to become hyperactivated and then misdirected, constructing a coherent narrative from fragments that do not belong together. And because the narrative is internally consistent, and because it is emotionally rewarding, it is extraordinarily resistant to external correction. Antipsychotic medications that target dopamine regulation can reduce the intensity of the delusion in some patients. Cognitive behavioral approaches, adapted for psychosis, can, over time, help patients examine the evidential basis of their beliefs. But treatment requires engagement, and engagement requires that the patient experience sufficient distress to seek help. Herein lies the particular cruelty of erotomania as a diagnostic challenge. The patient is frequently not in pain. They are, from the inside, in love. It is often only when the behavior escalates to the point of legal intervention, or when the object of the delusion is placed in genuine distress, that the machinery of psychiatric care is able to engage at all. In Claire's case, the lever that finally opened the door to intervention was not self-awareness. It was a court order. Claire's family became involved after Daniel pursued a restraining order, and the associated legal process required that she be evaluated by a court-appointed psychiatrist. The evaluation led to a formal diagnosis. Claire did not accept the diagnosis initially. This, too, is typical. The diagnosis was, in her frame, evidence of how far the forces working against her connection with Daniel were willing to go. She agreed to outpatient psychiatric treatment, in part because refusing would have had legal consequences, and in part because one of her sisters, the person she trusted most in the world, sat with her for 3 hours and asked her, without judgment, to consider the possibility that something in her mind had turned a corner she hadn't noticed. Treatment was slow. Antipsychotic medication reduced what her psychiatrist described as the cognitive pressure behind the belief. The sense of urgency and certainty that had made the delusion feel like lived truth. The letters stopped. The surveillance behavior stopped. What remained for a long time was grief. And this is perhaps the most clinically underreported aspect of recovery from erotomania. The delusion had been the most important thing in Claire's life for nearly 2 years. Its dissolution was not relief, it was loss. In follow-up sessions over the next 18 months, she described the recovery as learning to grieve something that had never existed while accepting that the grief was real. She remained in treatment. She returned to work, reduced hours. The relationship with her sister deepened. She did not, as far as her treatment record reflects, have contact with Daniel again. What Claire's case asks us to sit with is not the question of danger, though danger can exist in erotomania and has, in other cases, been severe. What it asks us to sit with is something more fundamental. The human mind can construct an entire relationship, complete with history, meaning, reciprocity, and love, out of nothing. And it can make that construction feel more real than anything the external world offers to contradict it. We assume that reality is the thing we share. That perception is a reliable bridge between what is and what we experience. Claire's mind built a bridge to somewhere that wasn't there and walked across it every day for 2 years and felt each time that she had arrived. That is not a horror story about a dangerous person. It is a quiet, unsettling reminder of how much of what we call reality is something the brain is simply choosing to confirm. If you like unsettling psychology, like and subscribe for a new diagnosis each week.